My name is Aja Mims, and this is my informative speech on being more than distracted. If someone were to ask you what are the main symptoms of ADHD, more often than not you would say that it is being easily distracted. Despite being diagnosed in 2014, I would have said the same thing. However, I now know that there are plenty of other symptoms that make this disorder so complicated. In both my research and experience, there are three main symptoms of ADHD that are so disruptive, such as sensory processing issues, executive cognitive dysfunction, and developing comorbid disorders. ADHD is an invisible problem that many observers take as some form of purposeful disobedience, when in reality this disorder impacts all the basic functions of a person, especially when it comes to their senses. So to understand why ADHD is more than being distracted, we have to understand how sensory processing issues plays a role in the way people take in information. Sensory processing issues are incredibly crippling for a child or adult's ability to decode information. This can impact them in relationships, work, and school. Sensory processing disorder is a neurological complication that makes a person's brain have a more difficult time processing input from one's senses. These difficulties can appear as distracted when in all actuality it's actually just that they cannot process the information presented. On a regular basis, I have problems with my own sensory processing issues. At work, I ask people for assistance often to be effective. However, amongst the noise of the environment, I cannot always hear what someone is saying. It's as if I am one of the peanut gallery kids with an adult talking and all their words are muffled and distorted. Much like sensory processing disorder, executive function issues are another contributor to why ADHD is disruptive. Executive function disorder makes simple tasks like recalling information and making decisions like climbing a mountain. It is an umbrella term for many things such as anticipation, goal selection, planning, initiation of activity, self-regulation, mental flexibility, deployment of attention, and utilization of feedback. Among other things, this can make mundane tasks almost impossible. Imagine when you go to cook food that your stove doesn't have any buttons. What would you do? A neurotypical person would find another solution. But for someone with ADHD, there isn't always a way. ADHD Alien made this clear when she explained why she had not eaten all day. This is to help people better understand that it is not because she's lazy, but because she could not get past the mental block. Now that I have explained the previous symptoms, I can show how comorbid disorders contribute and play off of the symptoms of ADHD. Comorbid disorders are any mental disorder that coexists with another. Diagnoses such as anxiety and depression are often linked together with or instead of ADHD. ADHD, much like other illnesses, have overlapping symptoms, and these symptoms can lead to other disorders. Comorbid psychopathologies include mood and anxiety disorders, substance use disorders, and personality disorders. These issues can develop from the way ADHD is perceived. The bulk of evidence suggests that ADHD remains under-recognized and undertreated. Many physicians will assume that it is something or nothing at all, when it is a multitude of disorders. As we now know, ADHD is far more complicated than just being distracted, and depression and anxiety contain this overlapping symptom. They are similarly described as lazy, and these comments can negatively impact a person's self-image and also prevent them from receiving the help they need. Comorbid disorders, executive function disorders, and sensory processing disorders all combine together to make ADHD much more intrusive and destructive to those who have it. ADHD is a combination of many different aspects that ultimately make life difficult, thus making this much more than simply being easily distracted. We now understand that there are three main symptoms that impact people with ADHD. Their sensory processing issues, executive cognitive dysfunctions, and the potential to develop comorbid disorders. Sensory processing disorder disrupts all aspects of communication with the people in their environments. Executive function disorder impacts their basic abilities in ways like taking action, finding solutions, and caring for themselves. Comorbid disorders can develop from their internalized negative comments, and the inability to be properly treated. ADHD impacts everyone differently, but that doesn't mean these invisible symptoms can be ignored. Be mindful of what you say and think. Here is my bibliography. Thank you for listening.